Dara thought she had found forever. The charming husband, the promise of partnership, the dream of a safe home. But when her grandmother's inheritance came into play, the man she trusted revealed his true design. Not love, but conquest. Every spreadsheet, every signature, every whispered "what's mine is ours" was a step toward betrayal. What Lucas didn't know was that Dara had been taught never to surrender, especially not her power. In a courtroom battle that would expose his lies and reclaim her legacy, Dara must prove that survival isn't just about holding on, it's about fighting back. Although Dara never grew up believing in fairy tales. By the time she turned 11, she already knew how to budget a grocery bill, file taxes for her grandmother, and explain compound interest better than most adults. Raised by Mary Miller, a Depression-era survivor turned small-town property investor, Dara's childhood was laced not with bedtime stories but financial wisdom whispered over coffee and spreadsheets. Mary wasn't a typical grandmother. She didn't knit, she didn't bake cookies. But she taught Dara something far more valuable: self-reliance. "Your money is your backbone, Dara," she used to say. "Lose it to love, and you'll be crawling." At 36, Dara had become everything her grandmother dreamed of. A respected financial consultant in Chicago, founder of a boutique firm serving women-led startups, and proud owner of her own downtown condo. She dressed in tailored suits, sipped strong espresso, and spoke fluent Wall Street. Her life wasn't perfect, but it was hers. Built brick by brick, deal by deal, late night by late night. And when Mary passed away 3 years ago, she left Dara one final gift: a charming 2-bedroom cottage by Lake Michigan, and a trust fund with the clause so specific it made the attorney pause. Assets gifted through this will, the clause read, shall remain separate and protected from marital claims, regardless of any joint declarations or spousal influence. It was the legal version of Mary's favorite saying, "Don't let love write checks against your legacy." At the time, Dara chuckled. She wasn't even dating anyone. But still, she respected the intent and the warning. And then came Lucas. Tall, with salt and pepper hair, an MBA from Columbia, and an effortless charm that felt disarming, like he wasn't trying to impress anyone, just get you. He asked questions no one else asked. He remembered small details. He respected that Dara's time was limited and her calendar sacred. Most men found her intimidating. Lucas, he called her magnetic. They met at a financial literacy panel in Minneapolis. He was on the board of a nonprofit that promoted investing skills in underserved communities, and after the event, he offered to walk her to her Uber. They ended up sitting at a late-night diner until 2 a.m., talking about life, books, childhood dreams. Dara remembered texting her friend that night. He listens, like really listens. 6 months later, they were inseparable. 9 months later, married in a courthouse with no guests, no prenup. "We don't need it," Lucas had said. "We're both adults, both successful. This is about love, not paperwork." For the first time in years, Dara let her shoulders drop. She trusted someone, really trusted. Until 3 words changed everything. "What's mine is ours," Lucas said one evening, while running his hand over a brochure for a cabin renovation loan. Right? Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from, and make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. At first it felt sweet, intimate, the kind of phrase people in love said, but something about it lingered, not in her chest, but her gut, a flicker of hesitation, a whisper of Grandma Mary's voice, "Lose it to love." But she shook it off. She was overthinking, she was just cautious. And besides, this was Lucas. The man who respected her ambition, who brought her chamomile tea during late-night strategy calls, who never once made her feel guilty for making more than him. He couldn't be the problem, right? Lucas had a way of noticing things no one else did. The first time he came over to Dara's apartment, he didn't comment on the view of the skyline or the sleek designer furniture. He walked past the living room and went straight to her bookshelf. "First edition of The Intelligent Investor," he said, running his fingers along the spine. "Signed, too. That's rare." She hadn't even remembered leaving it there. He looked at her with a small, knowing smile. "You're not just smart. You're dangerous." Dara laughed, brushing it off. But deep down, the compliment hit different. Not like the condescending, wow, impressive she'd grown used to hearing from dates who were intimidated by her resume. With Lucas, it felt admiring, equal. He didn't compete, he didn't shrink. He met her where she was. And for Dara, that was rare. They settled into a rhythm faster than she expected. Weeknight dinners turned into sleepovers. He'd text her in the middle of the day, "Eat anything today? Or are you running on adrenaline again?" He bought her noise-canceling headphones for late work nights. He introduced her to his friend group, architects, nonprofit execs, a few fellow finance guys. And they seemed genuinely normal, kind, grounded. One evening, as she walked into his condo, she noticed a candle lit, jazz humming in the background, and dinner already plated on the counter. "You've had a hell week," he said, pulling out a chair. "Sit down. I'll pour the wine." She blinked. Was this what it was like to be seen? Lucas never asked for anything, never made her feel like she had to explain why she worked weekends or why she didn't want kids, yet. He said he admired her ambition, that it reminded him of his own mother, a woman who'd raised 3 boys while managing 2 jobs. "You remind me of her," he whispered one night. "Strong, sharp, no one messes with you." Dara's heart ached with that kind of praise. She'd spent years earning her power. Now, here was someone who didn't just accept it, he cherished it. She started letting him in, literally and figuratively. He kept a drawer at her place, then a closet. When his lease came up, she offered for him to move in. Lucas hesitated, not wanting to invade her space, but Dara insisted. By that point, it felt natural. One Friday night, 2 years into dating, Lucas proposed. They were at the lakeside cottage. Mary had left her sanctuary. Lucas had packed a picnic, carried a Bluetooth speaker to the dock, and they danced barefoot as the sun dipped into the water. Then he got down on one knee. "I didn't think I'd ever meet someone who made me feel lucky to be chosen," he said. "But you make me want to be better. Not just for you, but because of you." There was no grand diamond, just a modest vintage ring he said he found in a small shop in Vermont. Dara said yes before he even finished the question. They married 6 weeks later, a private courthouse wedding, no big party, no photos on social media. Lucas said he didn't care about any of that. All he wanted was her. And Dara? She felt safe. She was used to doing things alone, handling finances, steering her firm, planning every aspect of her life. With Lucas, she didn't have to. He took initiative, handled things, even filed their marriage license. "I know you hate paperwork," he joked. At first, he didn't touch her money. He paid for groceries, split the bills, contributed to vacations. He never asked how much she made or what her portfolio looked like. And maybe that's why she let her guard down. When he suggested they open a joint investment account, it felt logical. When he said they should both be on the deed for the cottage, since we'll both be putting in work on renovations, she considered it. "It's not about ownership," he said. "It's about partnership." The way he said it was smooth, reasonable, warm. Dara didn't say yes, but she didn't say no either. She told herself, he's earned this trust. Still, she kept her inheritance account separate, not because she didn't trust him, but because Grandma Mary's voice was a quiet echo in her head. Just in case. Then came the day Lucas surprised her with pre-filled loan documents for a home equity line of credit, using the cottage as collateral. All she had to do was sign. "It's for the upgrades, babe. It'll increase the property value. We'll both win." Dara hesitated. "We'll both win," he repeated. It was the first time those words sounded calculated. And just like that, the perfect partner began to feel like a perfect performance. It started with small things. Not sinister, not aggressive, just off. Dara first noticed it when Lucas casually dropped a comment during dinner one evening. "You know, I was reading this article about couples who don't merge their finances, and it said those marriages are 30% more likely to end in divorce." He said it with a laugh, half joking, half curious. Dara smiled, but her mind stalled. Why bring that up now? She brushed it off. Everyone had opinions on marriage, money, trust. Lucas had never pushed before, but that wasn't the last time. A week later, they were discussing vacation plans when Lucas pulled out a spreadsheet he'd made, a detailed household financial plan with color-coded tabs. "Just a rough draft," he said. "I figured we should start thinking long-term." She admired the initiative until she scrolled through the tabs and noticed he'd included her inheritance assets in the joint equity column. "Wait," Dara said, trying to stay light. "These properties, this lake house, they're separate. My grandma left them to me before we even met." Lucas shrugged. "Sure, but if we're building a life together, it's all shared in spirit, right?" That word again. Shared. Dara stared at him, not angry, confused. This wasn't the man who respected boundaries, who admired her independence. Where was this coming from? Over the next month, it happened again and again. Lucas started calling the cottage our place, even in front of friends. He suggested she add his name to her investment account for tax simplification. He once joked, "You're too rich to die without me on your will." Each time, Dara smiled politely, pushed back gently, and filed it away in her mind. She wasn't ready to accuse, but she was watching. Then came the credit card incident. One morning, while sorting through their kitchen counter mail pile, Dara opened a pre-approved card, offer addressed to Mr. and Mrs. Lucas Crawford, joint application pending. Her heart thudded. She hadn't applied for any joint credit. "Lucas, did you do this?" she asked, holding up the envelope. He chuckled. "Relax, babe. It was just an online offer thing. I didn't submit it." She stared at him. "But you entered our names?" "I thought it'd be easier if we just had one shared card for household stuff." "I wasn't trying to sneak anything." His tone was casual, dismissive. But that's exactly what scared her. He didn't think it was a big deal. That night, Dara sat in bed with her laptop and opened a blank spreadsheet. She titled it, "Red Flags." March 12th. Lucas included inheritance in joint spreadsheet. March 18th. Pre-filled joint credit card offer. March 25th. Called cottage hours on call with his mom. April 2nd. Pushed again about home equity loan. April 5th. Made joke about dying in will. What was she doing? Creating a case? Building a defense? Preparing for war? She didn't know. But her instincts told her not to ignore the pattern. One morning she went looking for one of her tax folders and noticed a drawer in Lucas's home office locked. They'd never had secrets, or passwords, or keys. Later that day she asked about it. "Oh, that?" he said, a little too fast. "Just old documents, student loans and stuff, embarrassing stuff. Nothing you'd care about." She let it go, but something inside her clicked. Then came the party. A close friend of Dara, Stephanie, hosted a birthday dinner. A few drinks in, people were joking about prenups and how couples divide Netflix passwords when they break up. Lucas chimed in, lighthearted but loud. "I always say, if you marry rich, you better know what you're entitled to." Laughter, clinking glasses. Dara smiled, but her eyes didn't. She watched him, really watched him. How he performed. How he read the room. How his charm was always calibrated. Just enough to win, never too much to suspect. That night, Dara dreamed of her grandmother. In the dream, they were in the kitchen of the lake house. Mary was making coffee. She turned, looked Dara in the eyes, and said, "You can love someone and still not trust them with everything. That's not paranoia, that's protection." Dara woke up sweating. She reached for her phone and Googled, "Signs your spouse is financially manipulating you." What she found made her sit up straight. Subtle push toward joint assets. Undermining boundaries under the guise of love. Secretive about past financial decisions. Charming deflections when confronted. Gaslighting? You're overreacting. Lucas wasn't forcing anything. He was nudging. A soft, persistent erosion of her independence. One smile at a time. Dara didn't have proof of anything illegal. Not yet. But she had a gut feeling. The kind Grandma Mary taught her never to ignore. It came as a message request on a Sunday afternoon. Dara was cleaning out her inbox when she noticed the little red 1 in her spam folder. Normally she ignored those, but something about the sender's name made her freeze. Allison Crawford. Her thumb hovered over the screen. She clicked. Hi, Dara. You don't know me, but I was once married to Lucas. I know this is probably strange, and maybe it's not my place, but if you ever feel like things aren't adding up, please don't ignore it. I didn't, and I lost everything. Dara's mouth went dry. She stared at the message, reading it again and again. Was it a prank? A scam? Lucas had never mentioned an ex-wife. When she asked about past relationships, he was vague, said they just didn't work out. Nothing serious. Nothing worth revisiting. But now this? She replied cautiously. Hi, Allison. I'm not sure what this is about, but I'd appreciate if you could be more specific. Allison called 2 hours later. Her voice was calm, too calm, like someone who'd told this story before, too many times. Lucas is charming, she began. That's his weapon. You feel like the luckiest woman alive. And then one day, you realize he's rewritten your entire financial life, and you signed every line. Dara's stomach turned. We merged accounts. He convinced me to invest in a joint business he never registered. Took out a loan using my name, forged documents. When I tried to leave, he told me if I went public, he'd ruin me. Dara's hands were shaking. She had questions. Too many. Why didn't you press charges? Because I signed half of it willingly. And the rest? I didn't have the resources to fight him in court. He knows how to pick women who are successful, but isolated. Allison paused. You're smarter than I was. If you see it now, don't wait until it's too late. Dara sat in silence long after the call ended. She wanted to scream. She wanted to believe Allison was lying, bitter, jealous. She wanted to believe Lucas was different with her. But deep down, a part of her already knew. She opened her red flag spreadsheet, scrolled, highlighted, added. April 15th, contacted by ex-wife Allison, claims history of financial manipulation. Then she made a new tab, investigation plan. The next morning, Dara called an old law school acquaintance, now a private investigator. She laid out what little she knew, Lucas's full name, date of birth, previous addresses, phone number. I'm not accusing him of anything, she said. I just want to verify what's real and what isn't. The investigator didn't blink. You'd be surprised how often I get these calls. 3 days later, the report arrived. Lucas Crawford, background file. Previously married to Allison Monroe, 2014 to 2017. Divorce filed after financial dispute. Married to Vanessa Nguyen, 2009 to 2013. Similar claims. Forged business accounts, manipulation. Registered shell companies in multiple states. One company flagged for IRS audit, no charges filed. History of short-term jobs, never held long-term employment over 12 months. Dara sat at her desk, numb. Lucas wasn't a partner. He was a predator. A pattern, not a person. She remembered his words. This marriage isn't about money. It's about love. No, it was about access. Access to her name, her assets, her reputation. Dara pulled out the manila folder she'd once used to hold Mary's letters. She added a new label, evidence, Lucas. She printed every email, every text that felt manipulative. Screenshots of her red flag spreadsheet, a copy of Allison's message. Then she called her lawyer. You're not overreacting, the attorney said firmly. You're doing what most women don't do, preparing early. Dara leaned back, eyes burning. He thinks he's smarter than me. He thinks you're too in love to fight. That night, Lucas came home with flowers. He kissed her cheek, joked about a client who couldn't read a balance sheet, and poured her a glass of wine. Dara smiled, played her part. But inside, something had shifted. She wasn't the woman who ignored her instincts anymore. She was Mary Miller's granddaughter. And she was done, pretending not to see what was right in front of her. From the outside, nothing had changed. Lucas still brought her coffee in the mornings, still made her laugh during dinner, still called her babe, with that soft inflection that once made her heart skip. But inside Dara, everything was different. She had the truth now, not a suspicion, but confirmation. And once you see the trap, you stop walking blindly into it. So she played along, smiled when she needed to, kissed when expected. But behind the scenes, she was rewiring the game. The first thing she did was change all her passwords. Then she scheduled a meeting with her private banker, in person, no phone calls. She requested a full audit of all her accounts, especially the ones with recent access activity. Nothing out of line yet. But Lucas had access to their joint expenses. She noticed a few oddities. A $700 transaction to a marketing firm in Nevada. A small wire transfer to a consultant Dara had never heard of. She printed everything. Document first. Accuse later, her lawyer advised. The moment he knows you're suspicious, he'll vanish or escalate. One morning, Lucas accidentally left his iPad on the kitchen counter. Dara opened the Notes app. Most were random reminders, grocery lists, passwords, quotes from podcasts. But one stood out. D. Cottage appraisal? And beneath it, leverage line of credit, $250,000 EST. She stared at the screen, her heart pounding. He was calculating. Not dreaming, not suggesting, calculating. Like a man planning a move on a chessboard, 5 steps ahead. The next weekend, Lucas brought it up again. Babe, have you thought more about renovating the lake house? I found this amazing contractor, says the value could double with just a few tweaks. Dara nodded, letting him continue. I also talked to a broker. We could pull a loan using the equity, then reinvest it into something more liquid. Just for a few months. She tilted her head. You already talked to a broker? Just casually, he said quickly. Didn't sign anything. I'd never do that without you. She smiled. Of course not. That night, she pulled out the folder labeled Lucas Phase 2. Inside, notarized copies of her property titles, her will, her inheritance documents. She added another page. Action plan. Separate attorney on retainer. Financial records backed up, cloud plus USB. Secure copies of all joint accounts. Track Lucas's communications. Record future conversations. Check local legality. She wasn't just defending herself. She was building a case. Then came the moment he pushed too far. Dara came home from work one evening to find Lucas on the phone, his voice low but sharp. He didn't hear her enter. She stood behind the kitchen wall, just out of sight. No, I told you, it has to be in her name. Trust me, she's close. I just need her to feel like it's her idea. Silence. Then, she won't suspect anything. She trusts me. Click. He turned around, startled to see her. Hey, babe. I didn't hear you come in. Dara smiled. Everything okay? Yeah, just a buddy from college, starting a business. You know how it is. She walked past him to the fridge, keeping her breathing calm. But inside, she was done pretending. That weekend, she invited Lucas to the lake house. Maybe we should talk about the renovation, she suggested. He lit up. Really? That's amazing, babe. You won't regret it. They drove up together. Dara let him play his music, let him talk about floor plans, let him think the game was his. But when they arrived, there was someone waiting at the door. Her lawyer. Lucas froze. What's going on? Dara stepped forward, holding a thick envelope. These are legal documents. They establish in writing that this property remains separate, per my grandmother's trust. It cannot be leveraged, loaned against, or signed over without severe legal consequences. Lucas opened his mouth, closed it. Her lawyer added calmly, You're welcome to have your own counsel review. But moving forward, all financial decisions involving Dara's assets will go through legal channels only. Lucas laughed, too loudly. You're lawyering up on your husband? Dara didn't blink. I'm protecting what I built, just like you planned to take it. He didn't fight. Not right away. For the next few days he sulked, gaslit, tried to guilt her. I thought we were a team. You're letting paranoia ruin something real. You're listening to people who want to tear us apart. She said, nothing, because the trap had sprung. And Lucas, the man who once made her feel seen, was finally exposed for what he was. A strategist, a manipulator, a thief in a lover's mask. The lake house had always been a sanctuary. Nestled in the woods of northern Michigan, with weathered cedar siding and a wraparound porch, it was where Mary Miller taught Dara to fish, to budget, and most importantly, to listen to her gut. It was also where Mary made her last chess move. After confronting Lucas with the legal documents, Dara knew the war wasn't over. He had too much charm, too many angles, and a desperation that reeked of unfinished business. That night, after Lucas left in a fury, slamming the car door hard enough to shake the windows, Dara sat alone in the study, sifting through the antique desk her grandmother had once used as a writing nook. In the bottom drawer, behind a false panel Mary had shown her years ago as a just-in-case secret, Dara found a manila envelope marked in Mary's sharp cursive. In the event of marriage. She opened it slowly. Inside, a hand-signed document, a notarized addendum to Mary's will. It outlined, in crystal-clear legal language, the lake house and all assets associated with it were to remain non-marital property, immune from any current or future spousal claims. Any attempt to claim shared ownership would trigger a legal firewall clause. The asset would immediately transfer to a protected trust under Dara's name, accessible only with two-step authorization from the estate lawyer and trustee. The clause also included a preemptive revocation of access, meaning that if anyone, spouse or otherwise, attempted unauthorized use of the asset as collateral, the system would notify the estate attorney. Dara's breath caught. It wasn't just protection. It was a fortress. She turned to the second page, a handwritten letter. My Dara, if you're reading this, it means love may have gotten complicated. That's okay. It happens to the best of us. But never forget what I taught you. A partner who loves you doesn't need your keys. They trust that you know how to drive. I left this place to you because I knew one day someone might try to take it. Let them try, and then let the law laugh in their face. Love you always. Grandma Mary. Dara closed her eyes, pressing the paper to her chest. She didn't cry. She smiled. The next day she called her estate lawyer. Initiate the firewall. Are you sure? The lawyer asked. Once activated, Lucas can't legally touch the property, and any attempt to do so could be used in court against him. That's exactly what I want. Over the next few days, Lucas shifted tactics. No more soft guilt trips. Now it was irritation, passive-aggressive comments, cold shoulders. So what, you don't trust me now? Guess I married into a vault, not a family. He brought up divorce once. Carefully, said maybe they'd rushed things, maybe they needed a break. But he said it like a dare, like he wanted her to panic. She didn't. Then, as Dara predicted, he made a move. She received a letter from a small bank in Wisconsin, where Lucas's business consultant had attempted to open a credit line using the lake house as collateral. But thanks to the firewall clause, the system flagged the attempt. The bank, following protocol, denied the loan and forwarded the documentation to Dara's legal team. It was the final nail. Dara's lawyer prepared a civil case: fraud, attempted misrepresentation of marital property, and breach of implied fiduciary duty. The case was strong. But Dara wasn't rushing to court yet. She had one more move. She invited Lucas to dinner. Cooked his favorite lemon chicken, wild rice, roasted garlic asparagus. He ate quietly, sipped wine, watching her, measuring. After dessert, she slid a folder across the table. What's this? Everything, she said. I know about the credit line, the fake company, your ex-wives, the forged applications, the lies. He went pale. You've been spying on me? No, I've been protecting myself. From the moment you smiled at me across that panel room. He opened the folder, saw copies of the report, bank letters, the firewall documentation. And finally, Mary's letter. You think this'll hold up? He asked bitterly. You think a dead woman's paranoia makes you untouchable? Dara leaned forward, voice calm. I don't think, I know, and the court will too. She stood. You can walk away now, quietly. Or you can take this to court, where everything will become public record, including your last 2 marriages, your offshore accounts, your fraud. Lucas didn't respond. He just stared at her, eyes filled with a mix of rage, disbelief, and fear. That night, Dara sat on the back porch of the lake house, wrapped in a flannel blanket, the stars blinking above like quiet witnesses. She sipped her tea, the mug warm in her hands, and whispered, "Checkmate." The first day of court was colder than it should have been for late spring. Dara stood outside the courthouse in a navy pantsuit, her shoulders squared, her jaw set. Her attorney stood beside her, holding a leather briefcase filled with documents that had taken weeks to compile and a lifetime to protect. Inside, Lucas was already seated. He looked polished, controlled, a crisp gray suit, hair perfectly styled. That same easy smile that once disarmed her now made her stomach churn. "He's confident," her lawyer whispered. "They always are, until the paperwork starts talking." The case had been filed under Crawford versus Crawford, though that name now felt like a lie. Lucas was suing for 50% of the marital estate. He claimed the lake house had become a shared asset through joint use and investment planning. He cited conversations, renovation ideas, and one pre-written loan document never signed as intent to co-own. Dara's team filed a countersuit: fraud, coercion, and attempted misappropriation of inheritance. It was no longer just about the house. It was about principle. The judge was a woman in her 60s, known for her no-nonsense style and disdain for theatrics. As court opened, Lucas's lawyer stood. "Your Honor, my client simply seeks fairness. He entered this marriage in good faith, supported his wife emotionally and logistically, and participated in plans to develop the lake property for shared benefit." The judge nodded. "And the paperwork?" "There was an informal understanding." She raised a hand. "We're not here for feelings. We're here for facts." Then Dara's lawyer stood. "We'd like to begin with Exhibit A." He handed the clerk a folder. Inside, the original will from Mary Miller, the addendum, the firewall clause, the trust documentation, the inheritance protection statute under Michigan law. The courtroom shifted. Lucas's jaw tightened. Then came Exhibit B, a timeline of Lucas's previous marriages, including affidavits from both ex-wives. Though neither were present, their sworn statements told a damning story. Pattern of emotional manipulation, use of charm to gain financial access, business proposals that led to debt and dissolution. Then came Exhibit C, the flagged loan application, attempted collateralization of the lake house. The recorded phone call with the broker, Lucas saying it'll be under her name, just draft it. Lucas's lawyer stood, voice shaky. "Your Honor, these are unrelated incidents. My client never committed fraud. At worst, there were miscommunications." Dara's attorney stepped forward. "Then why," he said, lifting the last document, "did Mr. Crawford attempt to open a line of credit on an asset clearly titled as non-marital?" He walked to the bench. "Because he knew what he was doing, and he thought, like always, no one would stop him." Lucas finally stood. "I loved her," he said, voice rising. "I was building a future for us." "You don't plan renovations for something you think is temporary." The judge looked at him, unblinking. "You also don't try to borrow $250,000 on a house that doesn't belong to you." Silence. Then she added, "And you certainly don't do it behind your spouse's back." By the end of the day, the verdict was clear. The lake house was ruled separate property, immune from division. Lucas's financial behavior was declared malicious and predatory, triggering penalty clauses. Dara was granted full protection of her remaining estate, with an option to file criminal charges. As they left the courtroom, Lucas turned to her one last time. "You think you won?" Dara paused, looked him dead in the eye. "No, Lucas. I know I didn't lose." Outside, reporters had gathered, not for her case, but another high-profile trial. Still, someone snapped a photo of Dara walking down the steps alone, head held high. The next day, a women's finance blog ran a story. She outplayed the predator, how one woman protected her fortune and her future. Dara didn't comment. She didn't need to. The documents had already spoken louder than she ever could. Healing didn't come in a wave. It came in fragments. In the weeks after the court ruling, Dara found herself waking up early, not from stress, but from the kind of silence that used to feel lonely and now felt like freedom. Lucas was gone. Not just from her home, but from her head. The space he'd once taken up, that constant second-guessing, the emotional landmines, had been replaced with something unfamiliar. Stillness. The lake house became her refuge again. She took a leave of absence from work. Not because she couldn't function. She could. But she wanted time to feel. To be angry. To be sad. To be proud. She painted the guest room. Replaced old curtains. Planted tomatoes with no clue how to care for them. And didn't care. She cooked messy meals and left dishes in the sink. She walked barefoot in the yard, read books under a blanket, and cried without apologizing for it. One night, she took out Mary's old typewriter and fed in a sheet of paper. She typed 3 words. I protected myself. And then, finally, she would be proud. But healing wasn't linear. Some days, Dara felt strong enough to climb a mountain. Other days, she couldn't even open her email inbox. She skipped a few therapy appointments, got snappy with a barista for no reason, burst into tears watching a dog food commercial. She called her lawyer 3 times in 1 week, just to confirm he can't contact me anymore, right? He can't, the lawyer reminded her gently. You're safe, legally, personally. Emotionally? That part takes time. It was during a grocery run that Dara ran into Stephanie, the friend who'd hosted the birthday dinner, where Lucas made that awful joke. Stephanie pulled her into a hug. We were all rooting for you, and you still won. Dara smiled weakly. Does it feel like winning yet? That's because you're still bleeding. But one day, it'll feel like you dodged a bullet. Or 10. That night, Dara did something she hadn't done in years. She wrote a blog post. Title, Financial Intuition Isn't Paranoia, It's Protection. She shared her story, not the legal details, but the emotional roadmap, the tiny gut checks, the spreadsheet she made. The moment she realized love can feel warm while still being dangerous. The post went viral. Within a week, she had hundreds of emails, mostly women, many successful, some not, thanking her. I thought it was just me. My boyfriend says I'm dramatic for wanting separate accounts. I showed my mom your blog. We cried together. One message stood out. Thank you. I finally left him. I didn't even realize I was being groomed financially. Dara exhaled. This was power. She turned the blog into a weekly newsletter, started doing live webinars, spoke at conferences on financial literacy and emotional boundaries. She called the series Red Flags and Receipts. The tagline? Protect the empire you're building, even from the person sharing your bed. Eventually, she returned to work, but restructured her schedule. More time for herself, more time for clients who actually cared. She hired more women, offered mentorships, gave pro bono consultations to domestic violence survivors rebuilding their financial lives. The more she shared, the lighter she felt. Lucas stopped being a shadow. He became a chapter. And chapters, Dara learned, don't define the whole book. One weekend, she hosted a retreat at the lake house. 5 women, each recovering from their own financial or emotional betrayal. They laughed. They swam. They screamed into the woods at midnight. And on the last night, they lit a fire and burned old letters, voicemails, even printouts of emails from manipulative partners. When it was her turn, Dara tossed in the last page of Lucas's bank fraud application, the one that started it all. The paper curled, blackened, and disappeared into flame, and she whispered, "You don't own a single piece of me." The lake house looked different now. Not because she'd renovated it. She hadn't touched the bones. Mary had always said, "Don't fix what isn't broken, just dust it off and make it yours." No, what changed was how Dara inhabited the space. Before, it had been an inheritance. Now it was an extension of her identity, a symbol not just of wealth, but wisdom. Not just of what Mary gave her, but what she defended. And in defending it, Dara realized something deeper. The legacy wasn't the property, it was the protection. She hung Mary's framed will in the entryway, not as decoration, but as a statement. Underneath it, she mounted a plaque. To every woman who's ever been told to, just trust. Here's to the ones who asked for receipts. Months passed. The blog exploded. She was invited to speak at Stanford's business school. Not just about finance, but about relational due diligence, the art of protecting yourself emotionally, legally, and financially. She sat on panels with divorce attorneys, forensic accountants, trauma psychologists. She shared stories, she listened to them, and more importantly, she connected the dots. Because Lucas wasn't a glitch. He was a system. And Dara? She became a systems breaker. One afternoon, she received a package in the mail. No return address. Inside was a handwritten note. You probably don't remember me, but I sat behind you in court. My sister went through something similar. You didn't know it, but watching you stand up there changed me. I finally left my husband. I'm building my own account now. Thank you. There was no signature, just a name written at the bottom. Avery. Dara cried. Not because she was sad, but because the legacy was multiplying. She launched a foundation, the Mary Miller Initiative, free legal resources for women exiting financially abusive relationships. She partnered with estate lawyers to provide firewall clauses like Mary's customized, affordable ironclad. She created red flag templates, simple checklists disguised as budgeting tools. Women started using them, quietly, strategically. And Dara smiled every time one landed in her inbox, labeled, "Not crazy, just prepared." One evening, sitting on the porch with a glass of wine, her friend Stephanie asked, "Do you ever miss him?" Dara thought. "No," she said slowly, "but I do miss the version of myself who believed people didn't need vetting." Stephanie raised an eyebrow. "And now?" "Now I still believe in love, but I love myself louder." That fall, a younger cousin, barely 22, came to stay at the lake house after a bad breakup. They talked late into the night. About trust. About boundaries. About how sometimes you can't see the danger until you've already called it home. And when Dara handed her a blank spreadsheet titled Red Flags, the cousin blinked. "Isn't this a bit much?" Dara smiled. "Maybe. Or maybe it's just the modern-day prenup for your heart." They both laughed. But the next morning, the cousin had filled out the first 3 rows. Years later, Dara wrote a memoir, The Man I Married and the Woman I Became. It opened not with pain, but with gratitude. For the warning signs. For the lessons. For Mary. It became a bestseller. Not because it was sensational, but because it was real. It gave words to feelings millions had but couldn't name. In interviews, people often asked, "What would you say to Lucas now?" And Dara always answered the same. Nothing. Because this story was never really about him. It's about every woman who's ever given too much, too soon, and learned to take it all back. The legacy wasn't stolen. It was fortified. The love wasn't wasted. It was redirected. And the woman once nearly erased by a charming smile and a forged document, she became the kind of woman her enemies feared. Informed, empowered, untouchable. End of story. In a world that romanticizes trust, we often forget to verify. Dara's story isn't just about a failed marriage. It's about emotional fraud, financial survival, and the power of generational wisdom. Too often, women are told that asking financial questions is cold, that drawing boundaries means you're not trusting enough. But what if boundaries aren't walls? They're blueprints for self-protection. Dara didn't just reclaim her house. She reclaimed her voice, her legacy, and her power. And in doing so, she lit a torch for others, walking blind into relationships where charm is a mask and control is the goal. The real love story here? A woman choosing herself. Again and again. Whether you're single, married, divorced, or somewhere in between, Dara's story is a reminder. Protect what you build, even from the person sharing your bed. If this story made you think twice about the word trust, you're not alone. Tell us in the comments. Have you ever ignored a red flag that turned into a full-blown warning sign? Or did you once protect something and thank yourself years later? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, especially if you believe stories like Dara's can save someone else's future. And if this episode got your heart racing, wait till you hear tomorrow's story about a bride who found a second family after suing the first one. Hit that bell icon so you don't miss it.